Welcome to a new podcast series on the Rediscover the 80s podcast feed called appropriately Rediscovered. We're going to dive into some obscure and overlooked TV shows, movies, and cartoons in which we may or may not remember in its initial release. Before we get into our first episode, let us introduce ourselves. I am Jason, and over there is my longtime friend Wyatt.
We keep adding more shows to our lineup, and I love it. And anything we can rediscover, whether it's the 80s, 90s, or just discovering anything, I'm all game for it. So this is another episode, I'll call it a chapter in our Rediscover
Yes.
the 80s book. I think we just need to do that.
True, very true. Because yes, we have the Memory Jogger podcast, of course, and we've done several other shows in the feed. But yeah, this is going to be a fun show to go back and maybe actually watch some things that we missed in its first run, or something we might remember vaguely as a kid watching on TV, like our topic mainly this week. And then going back and reviewing it now and seeing if it still holds up. So this should be a pretty fun show. Now we have kind of gone back and forth as we are just starting this series on how exactly do we tackle all of these things, and we've started a list, and I think what we were both agreeing upon was something that we can watch that is either in a few sittings, or something like a short-lived TV show, a movie, or like a short-lived cartoon series, maybe less than like 20 episodes, something like that we can get through without taking a month or two at a time to watch, and then getting on the podcast. But we were lucky to find this one on YouTube, and that's what kind of, I guess, spawned this whole show, right? Where we had been talking about the Highwayman on another podcast, on our Maskcast, and it just kind of came up. Hey, look, it's on YouTube, so let's go check it out. And
Right.
I think that's how we're gonna kind of tackle this. And I'm not saying we necessarily need to go after like the obscure shows too. Obviously, those are probably more entertaining for some people, but some people might just go, "What in the world are you guys watching?" So we might even do some more popular, or maybe what we call cult classic movies and shows that just for some reason or another missed us. But this is going to be a fun one, and I'm going to kind of throw it over to you because you have more memories of this show than me growing up.
Well, what's I guess odd about it, I had watched only one episode of this in its entirety during its true lifespan of what was it, 9, 10 episodes to include the pilot.
Yeah.
I still have that one video somewhere in my VCR tapes. And it was actually episode, I think 8 is the one I have where Jed basically becomes rogue and starts getting paranoid and so forth, starts capturing people. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's the only episode I had. Well, over the years and here and there, picking up on it, I'd see 1 or 2 clips, never a full episode. And that's how I learned more about the trucks, what they did or did not have. But I never really remembered watching any of it. And now we're, like Jason said, we spawned this whole episode really haphazardly. This podcast, because we always come back. Well, Jason usually comes up with something for Agents of Masks. He's my Jacko to my Highwayman, that kind of thing. And that's how it started out.
Yeah.
And we're like, that was that obscure, cool, high tech, almost Knight Rider-ish. It was almost a mix of Knight Rider and Airwolf to a very lesser degree, but kind of that same concept, because you got the helicopter and you got the super cool, well, kit dashboard really inside the truck. And we just started well, like we always say, we brainstormed and maybe we should start an episode where all we're talking about is, I guess in my eyes, the obscure.
Mhm.
Those obscure rarities that didn't make it, or and even in the movies where a great example would be Shawshank Redemption, right? Where
Mhm.
it bombed in the movies, it didn't do well, but yet it's a DVD sensation. Everybody's watched it. Everybody is like
Yeah. It was on
captivated by that
cable.
movie.
Yeah.
It's one of my better loved movies, but one, I didn't even know it existed in a movie platform. Honestly, I will be honest, but that tells you that it was a kind of a lesser known or obscure movie in the film theater world. So that's where I think, at least on my side of it, that's where we're going to take this. We're going to look at those obscure ones. We might hit the popular one that just didn't rank top 10 on the Billboard or whatever it is,
Yeah.
but I would like to tackle those obscure anomalies, even um, to pick on Eric Tukey over at BoulderHill.net. He took that um, what is it, the USA train
Yeah. The Cartoon Express.
Cartoon
Right.
Express, yeah. So I mean that was an obscure thing. If you didn't have USA, if you didn't have cable, you didn't know that thing existed. So
Right.
kudos to him because he obviously named his podcast out of that. And it was actually an awesome thing. And I'm like, I want to tackle just that, just
Yeah.
to pick on all the stupid cartoons, that came up and off, off that.
Yeah. And I can kind of go back and forth too with some people online about some of those like cult classic movies and how, for some reason or another, it missed me. Uh, one is, gosh, just kind of left me there. But anyway, and those are, a hot topic now. There's whole websites built on just like cult classic movies, TV shows, even, other podcasts that dive into this. So we're not necessarily, trying to get into uh, that world, but it's also something that's kind of personal as well. Where, like you said, you hadn't seen Shawshank Redemption in its initial run. I remember actually watching that one over at Brian Smeal's house, I think we were right out of high school. A few of us came over and watched that. I rented it. It was a rental, wasn't in the theaters. Um, but yeah, I mean that was you know uh, on cable for years, and it seemed like it was on every weekend on TBS, TNT, and those stations. And there's movies like that kind of get their glory after the fact, and then there's some that just were just totally died out, and they're not even on DVD yet. They're not even out there on streaming to get to that point to rewatch. So that's going to be a big part of how we, I think, go about trying to find what shows, what movies, what cartoons to watch, just basically what's available to us thanks to YouTube and some of the streaming services and such online. But yeah, so yeah, one of those like cult classics that missed me was called The Wraith, and my good friend Sean over at Brandon in the '80s. I remember seeing several, posts and tweets and stuff through the years. I finally watched it last year when it came to Netflix, and so that was fun to kind of go back and watch for the first time. So that's again too. I mean, uh, I want to go back and review some of the stuff that we remember as kids that we maybe only caught, like you said, one episode. But I also want to go back and see some stuff that I've just totally missed me. Not everybody can be at the movie theater every weekend, and not everybody has every channel, like you said, on on TV. Especially back in the '80s, if you didn't have cable, when the president's on, your night was shot. I think
Quoting
that was
Jeff
a Jeff.
Foxworthy.
Yeah, that was a Jeff Foxworthy one. Um, So yeah, I kind of went back and we created a list, and we'll kind of go through that and see how many that we both want to go and revisit, and we'll just keep adding, see what's available online,
That's probably the
and
key
then
part
just kind
there
of go
is
for
what's
there.
available, what's to watch. We may
Yeah,
not be able to get to watch. I'm just playing, devil's advocate here. Say the Dukes, the cartoon Dukes. Is it actually out there?
yeah,
Can we watch it? It might be copyright all the heck. We have to go to. I might have to take a trip back down to Cooters down in Luray, Virginia, and get a DVD.
yeah. I mean, that might be the thing. We might end up spending a little bit of our own money just to put these in our collection if we want to go back and do that, if they're not available, on streaming services or on YouTube. But anyway, that's kind of our setup to this series, we'll call it. And we're just going to have fun with it. I don't think we're going to necessarily tease you at the end of the show what we're going to do next. We'll just kind of go back and forth. I think, and then it'll be a surprise when we do the next show. And hopefully it'll be some things that, you all might not remember. And hopefully there'll be some too that you're okay. I do remember that. It was, uh, just totally, rings a bell with you. And I want to do, hopefully we'll get a good balance of stuff that you haven't watched or haven't heard of, along with stuff. Oh yeah, I want to revisit that. So I think that's kind of our approach as we go into these episodes. But let's go ahead and start this, man. Let's start, and we'll talk a little bit about this series called The Highwayman, and we found it over there on YouTube on this channel. It's called TV's underscore Sledgehammer, and his icon is Sledgehammer, which was a fairly obscure television show back in the 80s. And he had several on his channel. So we'll go ahead and tout him a little bit for taking the time to upload these. And we dove right into the Highwayman in this episode right here. And we'll just go kind of, what we're going to do is kind of go over like the synopsis of the show, when it was released, how many seasons. We'll go through kind of the creators and behind the scenes people, and we'll talk a little bit about the stars of the show, some guest stars. And I think for this show, since we only got there was 9 episodes and 1 TV movie, we might just go ahead and quickly run through the episodes and pick out some highlights to talk about. But the TV movie was originally released back in 1987 in September, and it followed this adventures of the Highwaymen, which is like this mysterious group. Presumably, they are the part of the U.S. Marshals, and they conduct crime-fighting missions and solve mysteries across the U.S. And each Highwayman is in this group and equipped with this high-tech, multifunctional truck and some heavy sidearms as well.
Yeah.
As we see through here. But created by Glenn A. Larson, which we know from one of our favorite shows, of course, Knight Rider. And he did several other shows: Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers, BJ and the Bear, The Fall Guy, and Magnum PI, just to name a few. I was really excited once I remembered that he was part of the show, and because like I said, Knight Rider was one of those that we just I can't get enough of even today. Was there anything that kind of stuck out to you as you went back and kind of looked over the history of the show?
Well, we identified it in Agents of Mass, but I feel like I'm kind of covering it again. I never really paid attention back in the day because I never really looked at who created it. I only saw that one episode, like I had said. So what caught my eye, and it made sense, complete sense, after seeing the dashboard, how similar it looked like to the season 4, season 3, season 4 of Knight Rider, of Kit's Dash. It looked very similar. It had the little bit brighter slightly wider LED pattern, kind of more modern pattern with the little TV screen in the middle. And you could see the tachometer and the speedometer light bar just like you would, except, Kit was curved, obviously.
Uh-huh.
Um, but when I saw it was Glenn Larson, I'm like, well, geez, that would just make sense. I see Kit right there. It's configured a little different, but I see Kit at least on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I honestly didn't know he did Magnum PI. I'll be honest. I knew he did a lot of other things. I just didn't know he was a part of Magnum PI.
Yeah.
But that's what stuck out, I think, the most to me, and how similar it was in that instead of the truck, like on Knight Rider, right? The truck was the remote office / repair shop for Kit. This was the star. The truck was the star, and it just happened to carry whatever it needed. On occasion, it happened to carry a Lotus right behind it. Whenever he needed to go and actually go out on the town, or drop or tell DC to go take a ride back to town, or whatever it was. So
Mm-hmm.
that was what was kind of cool, that they very subtly married Kit and really Knight Rider into that truck, and I applaud them how they did that very well.
Yeah. We need to also mention too that the essentially co-creator of the show, Douglas Hayes, he was also tied to Magnum PI, directed several of those episodes, and also directed the pilot movie for Highwayman. So he was part of that creative team as well. And then we had several stars here on the show we wanted to go over, just to talk about, I guess, their part in the show, and I guess a little bit behind where they came from, a little bit of their filmography. But Highwayman starred Sam Jones, who most people would know from the Flash Gordon movie back in 1980. He also played several little bit parts in popular TV shows. He had an episode of the A-Team, Hunter, Riptide, Hardcastle McCormick, and then he did a couple cameos. If you ever seen the movie Ted and Ted 2 with the little bad-mouthed teddy bear, in recent years, he had cameo roles in there with his bleach blonde hair, like from Flash Gordon. But I didn't really remember him. Flash Gordon was not one of those films that I've seen over and over again, and is really a cult classic to me. So I really was not connected to him much in any way before going on and rewatching The Highwayman.
Well, you have me dumbfounded now, because I never watched the original Flash movie back in the '80s, but you're telling me that he was on an episode of A-Team, and I'm trying to fast forward through my head and try to think where I've seen him, and I cannot place him. I'm gonna have to dig out my A-Team and watch it.
Yeah, I don't remember which episode either. It's not really noted in here. We'll have to kind of dig through there and see what we can find and remember which episode he was in. But and then we have a couple actors that were in basically the pilot movie, and we'll talk a little bit about maybe the differences between the pilot movie that was released and then once they started the actual TV show. But in the pilot movie, we had Claudia Christian, who played Dawn. She was like the dispatch almost, and she's probably best known for her role in the series Babylon 5. And she's been in some other, I would call probably bit parts too, through several movies and TV shows, but that's probably what she's best known for. And then we also had Stanford Eggy, who was Mr. Toto in the pilot. Now he was, I believe, the tech guy that showed up and showed Highway how to um, make the truck invisible. If you remember that part in the movie,
Yeah.
um, which is pretty cool. Uh, and he's not really known for much else than a few things here or there. So those two actors, again, they were only in the pilot movie. And then once we started up the show, this is where we get essentially Highway's counterpart, who is Jeddo, who's played by Mark Jackson, aka Jacko, who most people remember from the Energizer Bunny commercials. Uh, Get new Energizer, oi! He always brought the he always brought the energy as he's doing these Energizer commercials, and they had the little jingle, and he had I guess you would say probably more of a short-lived career in television. This being well, of course, he came from Australia, and he had a big background in the Australian rules, like football, as an athlete, and then he started acting, and basically his first gig, like I said, was the Energizer commercials, and he did some other commercials for Nutri-Grain, and then of course doing the Highwayman. And really, that's not, there's not much else there. There's a couple other short little parts in his filmography in 1994, one called Signal One, and then later some other films in the 2000s. But this is kind of the peak of his career in show business, doing this show. If that tells you anything, a 9-episode show. We also had some other actors in the series. Jane Badler, who played Tanya Winthrop. Now, she was kind of like Highway's, I guess you would call her boss, in the show. And she was in several episodes, basically giving Highway direction and what to do in his missions and so forth. She was also in the series V, if you remember that, in its original run, where we had those aliens hiding out as humans. Oh man, that scared the crap out of me as a kid. But she did some other television shows in the 80s. Some like guest appearances. Riptide is one. She had a pretty long part in Falcon Crest for a while. 22 episodes, and then Jake and the Fat Man, she was a guest star, and Murder, She Wrote, that sort of thing. She was in a Mission Impossible TV show for 24 episodes in 1989 and 1990, and then just some other little bit parts here and there episodes. And they did bring her back actually for the V reboot in 2011. And she got 9 episodes in there. So she was the boss, essentially. We had Tim Russ as DC Montana in the series, and he was now more of the, I guess, what I would call the Bonnie of Knight Rider,
right?
In the sense of being the mechanic or taking care of any problems with the truck, introducing new technology, that sort of thing. He is, I guess, primarily known for Star Trek Voyager, and he was in the Nickelodeon series iCarly, Samantha Who. So there's some smaller run TV shows. It's I did find out this was funny, where in the movie Spaceballs, when they are combing the desert, and the guy looks up and says, "Man, we ain't found." Yeah, that was him.
That's where he's from. I'm gonna try to place him on Spaceballs. I knew I'd seen him
So
somewhere on there.
yeah, I thought that was probably the the best credit I've ever found when digging through Wikipedia on somebody. And then finally, we'll get through not really a person in the show per se, but the narrator of the Highwayman intro is William Conrad, who I guess most people would know as the Fat Man from Jake and the Fat Man, and several other credits to his name going back into the like 60s and 70s. It's his voice is very distinctible. Early career in like radio, and that was I don't know, probably back in the maybe 40s and 50s when he started his career. But several narration parts, Rocky and Bullwinkle, The Fugitive back in the 60s. And then, like I said, Jake and the Fat Man, he was on that show that ran from 87 to 92. There's the TV series Cannon that was back in the 70s as well. But several credits to his name dating decades. And like I said, doing that and it in essentially the narration part of his career. This was one of his last little parts. He did the narration for Hudson Hawk, which was 1992, and that's really the last in his filmography for voice credit. But very distinctable voice, and I thought it brought a lot to just introducing the show. And
Well,
even in the pilot movie, there was a longer narration there.
I find it funny with Glenn Larson, at least in these two series between Knight Rider and Highwayman, he liked that deep, almost a raspy voice to narrate, and that's what I found also fascinating with how Glenn must have picked this person, because it's very distinct, just like Richard Basehart was the narrator for Knight Rider.
Mm-hmm.
You can't not miss this voice. It's distinct, and it really, to me, it sets the atmosphere for what the show is, even though it seems like a slight narrative about especially with Highwayman. It's like a piece of it. It has to be there, just like on Knight Rider. That piece, has to be there. That little bit of verbiage. In fact, when we watch the pilot of Knight Rider, it feels wrong because there's no wording.
Right. You don't get that setup.
Right. And I love it. And I found it really uncanny and awesome to hear him. There's a world between here and now,
Yeah.
That was just awesome how he does it.
Yeah, it's very ritualistic, and so when you're watching each episode, that little bit of familiarity between episodes, I think, adds a lot to it, and to set up each episode. So anyway, I was doing a lot of talking there, and I'm going to throw it over to you before we get into basically running through the series. What, I guess, give me your thoughts on just like an overall on the show, and what did you really enjoy going back through and watching this time? Was it just you wanted to see Highway's rig in action, or was there another maybe element of the show that you never got in that first run or first couple episodes there that you remember seeing?
Right. Well, I guess for me, it's usually the vehicles. I love to see what the vehicles can do. I'll be honest, I was slightly unimpressed with what the helicopter could not do. I mean, granted, this was after Airwolf. So you expect to have some souped up chopper to do something other than fly around. I mean, it gets him out of trouble. And there's one episode where he's doing underground sonar looking stuff on it. but that's it. You still see Highway and Jetto, pointing their guns out the window, doing
Yeah.
whatever. I'm like,
Uh,
come on, put some rockets on this baby or something.
yeah. Yeah. That did not really compute with me either. And for those of you who have not watched the show, essentially Highway's tractor trailer, the cabin part opens up and a helicopter comes out and he's able to, well, I guess for the most part he uses it to get out of a sticky situation
Yeah,
or maybe even chase somebody down that's got a head start on him or something. It wasn't really, like you said, it wasn't really rigged up for weaponry or being used as a weapon. And that was hilarious to me. I think that was in the pilot actually, where we first see that and he hovers over, those rows of police cars and holds his shotgun out the window and just unloads on them and they're, blowing up.
more like a missile launcher, a small missile
Well,
launcher.
true. And that was another thing too that I don't know, it kind of set a little weird with me was this firearm that he has that is essentially like a rocket launcher in a shotgun sized form. And he carries it around like a pistol. It's a lot of firepower to have on your hip, trying to conduct your business. Uh, if people knew exactly what it did and he whips it out and points at somebody, you pretty much tell him anything you wanted to tell
Yeah,
to not get blown up by this. But I did notice that too, and that was yeah, that was a little bit of a head scratcher coming from these vehicles that were stars of television shows back in the day that just had so much firepower on them. You think of, like you said, Airwolf, Street Hawk, Kit. Um, they all had some kind of missiles or could do some damage if you needed them to, and those were the weapons. But it was a little bit different, and again, I was disappointed, like we were talking about earlier, where you had that invisibility feature on there, or what do you call it, like
well, the stealth mode.
cloaking, stealth mode, yeah. um that was a neat feature, and I think they might have used it twice in the pilot movie, and you don't get it
No,
in the TV show. It just
no,
kind of
that
went
was
away.
something else you don't see. The other thing that I did like, I mean, I still think the truck was cool. You got the jet engines, but we only saw that happen once. Um, the other thing I saw, I had someone coming to visit me. Um, no, the other thing I liked about it, it was kind of that modern Western, if I could put it like that, where you do have kind of you got one draw with me attitude. You're
Yeah,
gonna regret you draw, because you get that killer killer gun on you. Um, but I like it. I like in that gun, even with the Western holster and the whole look. I still call it the sci-fi kid in me. Thought of RoboCop. It just didn't come out of his leg.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but nonetheless, I liked that. I also liked how it wasn't until the end of the series, but they really didn't. If they did it like Michael Knight, they really kept the um romance, the best term. They kept the romance down because I loved Knight Rider. Don't get me wrong, but Michael was out with every new chick every time, every episode, sometimes two. But
yes,
throughout the series, he had a hankering for Bonnie. So there was that subtle, you're the backup lady,
yeah,
whatever. So, but that's what I liked about this. They didn't really push it in front of you like other
right,
shows would, and that's what I appreciated really about it. Mainly
yeah,
because I'm as especially as a kid, you want to watch Knight Rider, you want to watch the kid jump and whatever else. You don't, as a parent, you really don't want your son looking at Michael's new girl in a bikini. I mean, Well, maybe you do, but the kids, you probably don't want to be doing that. But anyway, so that I love that. I love Jacko with coming on the scene. It took a while for me to get used to him. I've actually had to watch it again
It
to really
did, yeah.
enjoy him because he comes in there and he is that obnoxious younger brother you wish you could almost deny that he's your kin type of thing, because he just especially the one episode where he's like, "Hey, who parked their car in my super truck's spot? Your lights are on." That kind of thing. He just made this big obnoxious
Yeah.
entrance.
He was definitely a scene stealer more
Oh,
than
yes.
anything. Come in is loud and, like you say, obnoxious, and delivers a comedic line and laughs at his own joke, and you're on to the next scene, and he he gets a little on your nerve after a while. I mean,
He did it the first go around. I'm
it's
only on.
well, you're right.
I'm on. I was rewatching it to kind of make sure I still remembered what we were going to talk about today. Um, and he started to grow on me now that I've watched it and I've seen it. Um, what about you? What grabbed you? What did you like? What did you not like on the overall of it? I know I liked Jed OHS Truck too. I liked them both.
Yeah,
It's not like, divvying up Airwolf and Santini Air. Which one do you want? You want the little stripe copper, or do you want the cool jet engine dropper?
right. Well, kind of piggybacking on what you said about my concept of the show going in, and again, I think I vaguely remember probably watching the episode that you had recorded at your house, whenever that was, as kids or whatever. That was pretty much my only exposure to it. So going in and seeing the headline that it's like Knight Rider meets Mad Max, it was, yeah, it was kind of set in the future, but only by a few years, and it's probably because of just the technology they were using. At the time, it wasn't necessarily futuristic or what you would call post-apocalyptic, in Mad Max's case. So, and the feel of it kind of uh, changed somewhat too from the movie to the TV series, where I felt like the TV series was more just modern day, and they had that rundown section where the gang and the main character, or at least the story character in the pilot movie, was staying, and that kind of felt, all right, we're in the times of people happen to live wherever they can, and it's not a true modern culture, and capitalism, all that stuff going on. You have the poverty levels out there. So I felt that was a little bit maybe not accurate when looking at the description of the show. That it was just more okay. We're still in the. I think some of the episodes even said it was like 1992. So it's like maybe 5 years in the future from when it was actually released. So that was a little bit different than what I expected, and I thought it pretty much worked. Had they added in all these other new features and stuff to the truck and kept moving forward with that, then maybe it would have been better to go in the future a little bit more. But I was also kind of impressed just going through the first like 4 or 5 episodes. You, I mean, you went from like aliens to time travel. There was just kind of these what every it seemed like every show kind of went through at some point or another, but they were covering all the hot topics, I guess,
Yeah.
for uh, for shows at the time. And for the most part, I thought it worked. You know, there wasn't an episode where this is just stupid. I'm going to go on to the next one. I got it. I got through every episode in the movie, and came out the other end, pretty well enjoying it. And there was just those few disappointments, like you were saying, that where's the firepower on the trucks and that kind of thing. You want the trucks to be more of the stars. I thought Jed OHS Truck was a little bit of a letdown too. It was more like a sports car coming with a trailer. It
Right.
didn't seem. In just the look of it was cool. It was kind of futuristic, but didn't really do much for me in this day and age, I guess.
Well, what disappointed me with Jed OHS Truck was, they'd take it off the trailer to go faster, and it looked like essentially just an oversized 80s box car
Yeah.
going down the street.
Yeah.
But you see him flying that Hughes 500 every now and then, but you don't see where it comes from. And I always assumed, even to now, I've always assumed that little bubble you saw in the trailer, that was the dome for that canopy or the chopper. But you don't see the trailer split, or you don't see a little pocket where it comes out, just like Highway's truck. It's just, I think it's one of those, it's assumed, and they didn't know how to work the trailer that way.
Yeah, or didn't have the money to do the special effects.
Right.
You could essentially tell they were using somewhat the same footage recycled for Highway's animation there. I'll call it animation because you could tell it was models, but
oh yeah,
and they did that with Knight Rider too. And that was, you either did that or you had to spend some buku bucks on some major mechanical and robotics and stuff to do something like that in real life. So you can't blame them for the route that they took, and being a new series. I don't know how much it took to make each episode, but that TV movie wasn't cheap, blowing up all those cars and
no.
I actually physically building the rigs and stuff too. But okay, well, I guess since we kind of went back and forth, let's just run through the episodes. We'll talk a little bit about the guest stars and so forth as we go through here. We're not gonna, I don't think, spend too much time on this. We want to kind of get through here and get our final take and final recommendation or non-recommendation, I guess you would say. But so in the pilot and how the series starts out, I'm just going to read what I pulled here basically from Wikipedia, which is the mysterious highwayman becomes involved with a biker gang called the Bullets, who rob a small town bank, and their leader, Bo Ziker, ends up in jail. But it emerges that the Bullets were set up to take the fall for a huge fraud instigated by a local bigwig and the town sheriff. So I thought the pilot itself had like an A-Team episode feel, where it's kind of the small town and the sheriff and the mayor or whoever is backdooring all the citizens and stuff, and you got to bring in somebody, almost like a Knight Rider episode too, if you think about it. There's a lot of those small town go in and let's help these guys out. But it was I thought it was pretty fun. The guest star who played Bo Ziker is Jimmy Smits, who most of you will know from like NYPD Blue. He's had a pretty long career. I thought it was funny that he's kind of the almost the official guest star for pilot episodes, because he was the original partner for Don Johnson in Miami Vice in that pilot, and ends up getting shot. Spoiler alert! And in comes Tubbs. But so he was in there. We also had some fun guest stars in this one. Part of the biker gang is Lyle Alzado, who it was a former NFL player turned actor, and Rowdy Piper is in this, of course, from the WWF as we know. And then obviously later he did come back and wrestle in the WWE. So having those two in the biker gang and some of the other guest stars like G. Gordon Liddy, he was the big wig that was rear-ending the town in this one as well. Um, this was a pretty fun movie, I thought. What was your thoughts?
Well, right away, me and my connections, I saw a lot of the same actors in this pilot that they had in the pilot for Knight Rider. Uh, Different places, but the same people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was just fascinating that they used the same characters, and then on top of that, they had Wings Hauser for Sheriff Wyatt. And
Right.
right away, when I saw him, I recognized him from the Red Wolf episode of Airwolf. He's the
Yes.
rogue Red Wolf pilot. So it was awesome to see that they brought him out. And what's funny about G. Gordon Liddy, I didn't know who the heck he was until I was working radio
Mm-hmm.
in Illinois, and we had him as a radio talk show host. And then puzzle pieces started falling into place because I saw him in there. I saw him on, I want to say I saw him on 18 and
Yeah.
some other episode. I'm like, geez, this guy's an actor and or went radio.
Yep.
It was just fascinating to see these guys. And same thing, right? Me and my Dukes of Hazzard. Right away, when they're doing the bank robbery, they're using the same exact bank, the same corner building as the bank. Uh, so it was actually awesome to see that. And then just well, I couldn't keep my eyes off Hazard. That was about it. Uh, but it was so cool that they married all this together, even though Hazard's really that town set has been used for just about everybody anymore, it seems.
Right.
But to see the stars, and that at least when you're watching like Knight Rider and a couple of his pilots, he's throwing some serious bank into it, trying to get it to get off the ground. So by throwing those awesome actors, those guys that are the uh,
Or the hot names. Yeah, the hot names at the time.
right, even the supporting actors, the ones that you saw, like I said on the pilot, where you get um, the bartender. The
Mm-hmm.
bartender there was one of the bad guys on Knight Rider that tried to beat up on Michael, and he cleaned house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just oh my dude, Glenn, you just have these on retainer. You want to make sure that this sells, and I like it.
One other thing too, just going comparing to Knight Rider, is they dropped in several of the popular top 40 hits
Oh yeah.
um, in this movie, kind of like they did between scenes with Knight Rider. They would throw in a top 40 hit every once in a while. Usually it was sung not by the original artist, and for the most part, that's the same. I think in this movie, but you know, it was fun. I like that the contact point there for him, the woman was a disc jockey basically,
Mm-hmm.
and she would drop hints uh, as he's driving through town. This one goes out to the highway guy, and uh, he needs to call his mama or whatever she would say to essentially that was the way to relay messages to him. But they take some money to syndicate those songs in TV, and it could be part of the reason why the show's never been released on DVDs. Once you start getting into those
Mm-hmm.
territories, they either have to edit that song out somehow, or you got to pay those residuals royalties to keep those songs in there. So
What I did like about this, I wish they would have kept it going, was me looking back, because we've both been in the radio field, and
mhm.
that's they had the subtle DJ, the radio broadcaster, who was home base, and I thought that would have been so cool to be if they would have left that character be, and
Mhm.
just every periodically, hey, reach out to mama while we're spinning the tunes to Chicago or whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that is so cool to have that side channel sitting in the
Yeah.
radio station in the booth. No one else knows it except her. You know, hey, Highway, let's go out to check out the aliens over there in episode 2. You know, that thing. That would have been
Yeah.
so cool versus the rogue boss and that just happens to show up kind of like Archangel. Just shows up, makes the deal. Okay, you get involved, Highway, and she
Yeah.
it basically is in and out of the scene after that.
That's right. That's right. And I don't know, it's kind of weird too, it being radio, and how strong is this radio station that he's unless you got several people set up across the US as he's out on the highway, the highwayman
You said it
doing
in
his thing.
you said it in our Rediscovered the 80s, the Memory Jogger podcast. It's the AM skip. Crank out that power. It bounces off at night.
True.
It'll
Very
reach
true.
out to the longest stretch there.
Very true. Very true. It could have been an AM station. But anyway,
So we were talking about the rifle, right? The cool
yeah.
shot. The one thing I liked about this scene, and me being the religious man, is where the guy's like, "We gotta test this gun, right? We gotta check it out, you know." And he checks it out, and he goes to the indoor gun range, and pulls the trigger, and it happens to hit the wall right behind, or actually, I think the floorboard underneath the sheriff. And then the sheriff is sitting there saying, "Well, may God strike me dead." Boom. And Highway says, "You shouldn't mess with God, Sheriff." Me being a man of faith, I'm like, that right there. You don't mess. That's right. I love that scene. That was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I do remember that. But yeah, so I enjoyed the pilot, and then let's go ahead and transition into the series itself. Episode 1, Road Lord. This is one of the fellow highwaymen gets murdered, and Highway goes to investigate and uncover some sinister goings on at the local secretive production complex. But he's actually shocked to find that the man is still seemingly alive there, and there's something very different about him. Just a little fun fact here: the title on this episode is not shown on screen, which is the only episode of the series that actually doesn't tell you the name of the episode. But I guess some people gave it the Road Ranger as the title, but it's basically known as Road Lord with the copywriting on this. And there's a few notable people on this. Again, lots of sci-fi actors in and out throughout this series that people might know. And Lockhart from Battlestar Galactica, and you had Kent McCord also on the early Battlestar Galactica in this episode. What did you pull anything out from this one that you enjoyed?
Well, what I guess the oddity that I saw was the same Steve has the same truck as Highway, so or he borrowed the truck. One of the two happened. I liked that he was, I guess in that respect, he went to go to the family. Highway, that is, went to go to the family and pay his respects and tell them the news directly. And then this is where we find we get to meet Jed and his obnoxiousy, if that's even a word. And we see what clever device that he has. He has like a chromed boomerang, and this is how he knocks out the trucks. And his little thing is to lick it before he throws it. And what I find funny about it is, he pulls up along the trucks, and he just, instead of just, "Hey mate, looks like you're having a bit of trouble," he screams it. "Hey mate, he looked like you're having some truck problems." Like he's deaf or something. But I mean, it was cool. I mean, you get to see what he's carrying. But here's the thing, that the corny thing that I saw about it. He gets out of the truck, and the other truck driver doesn't know that this dude is packing some serious heat on his sidearm.
Right.
And he has a belt of nothing but serious bullets around his waist. So yeah, sure, I want some help. It wasn't even. It was like I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's funny because he's tall too. I think he's maybe a little bit taller than Highway. They're both pretty tall.
yeah,
But then to come in and just scream at people the way the way he delivers the lines, and just the personality overall of the character is just larger than life. And like I said before, he's just a scene stealer. He just goes in, and
yeah.
it's hard not to notice him. You know what I mean?
So tell me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to
Uh-huh.
find the actress that played. Is it Ann Lockhart? She played the wife.
I believe so. Yes.
So she was on Airwolf. I think she was even on Knight Rider. And every time I see her, at least in these episodes, she's always the crier. She's always the one that whines. She's always the one that gets hysterical. And that has to be her, like her thing to be able to be picked up. And
Could
I
be.
always see her, what, the whole thing. I'm like, dude, you must be known for this. Um, but that's the other thing I took from it is obviously that and I paid attention. You know how I pay attention to the vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Whenever they are driving it, I'm sure it's just because of the scene they got to pull up to the camera and their stops. Every time they're driving, the actors are driving, I don't hear that truck shift. I hear none of the trucks shift to second or third. They're always in first gear.
Hmm.
But if you see them out on the highway or they're getting up to speed, they must change out actors because then I hear the gears shift. So I don't know if it's like, okay, actor, you're going only 5 miles an hour, and that's the best you're doing. You're going to keep it at first. I don't want you to damage this truck. There's
Right.
only one of. I don't know. That's something me and my things I pick up. That's the thing I picked up on these trucks is it seemed like they never got it out of first gear, quite literally.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree as well.
So what about you? What
Um,
did you pick up about the episode aside from me rambling about the
uh,
mechanic?
it was okay. I mean, again, well, I mean, I don't know how much we can go into spoilers, but um, it was okay as far as I wouldn't rank it as one of my favorite episodes, really, of the whole series. But there's always this kind of episode, it seems, in these shows where you know somebody's friend dies, and
Mm-hmm.
they essentially are still alive somewhere and up to no good. That's a that's a stereotypical episode for whatever show you're watching back in the 80s, it seems like. So I don't know, that's why I was like, yeah, it was good, and you got to introduce, get you know accustomed to the new characters for the TV series, but that's pretty much all I took away from it. um the next one, however, was pretty good, called The Hitchhiker. And this one it had a fun plot because you had well, essentially, Highwayman, he's assigned to transport this uh, supposedly dead alien from a crash site to a research lab. And there's this reporter lady that comes on scene, and she's determined to find out what's going on. And then we find out that the alien might not be dead, as it you know sits up in the back of the truck. Um, well, I'll get into the guest stars. Of course, the one that really stuck out to me was Joe Rigobuto, who was in Street Hawk. He was Street Hawk's government buddy there, that essentially ran the show from his computer screen in their hideout. He was one of the army guys, essentially one of the major, I think, on base. So he immediately popped out to me. Trying to think who else might have been in this one that I would have recognized from somewhere else. But the episode itself, I thought was fun in that, you know, we get the mysterious aliens, and we get to learn a little bit more about Highway's truck too, and they call them in. They're not just essentially mystery solvers, but they're there to use their high-tech truck and transport, you know, secret things, uh, and to keep them safe, you know, since this thing is, I guess, practically impenetrable, or at least, you know, more safe than you would throwing it in a regular tractor trailer to get it across country. Um, but you got to tell a little bit more about Highway's job, essentially, by just going to transport this, and then you get this little sci-fi edge as
Right.
well with the episode. What did you pull out of this one?
Well, you say how high tech it is, or at least impenetrable, but I was really dismayed about this episode because not one of those army guys opens fires on that truck. They're sitting there
Well,
scrambling in the episode, come back here or whatever, and they're not doing a thing about it, and they have to chase them down.
right.
I'm like, so is this truck not at all bulletproof? That was my take. So I was a little upset that we didn't see that. Okay, this has the molecular bonded shell. This has something on it, armor plated
Yeah.
something. But
Well, I think
it's
it
kind of just a
did.
cheesy army. I'm like, army dude, open up, open the grenade launcher, something.
I think they did say that it somehow the trailer contained the radiation or something that the was supposedly given off. There was a reason why they were using the truck, whether it was, you know, armor plated or had the you know, the molecular bonded shell. We don't know, but there was a reason they used the truck to contain this alien body. It was giving off radiation. Um, anyway, I enjoyed this episode. It was probably one of the favorites out of the series. I'll let you go ahead and take the next couple introduction if you want to go ahead and do that.
Sure. Well, we all go on to episode 3, Till Death Duel Us Part. This is where Highway breaks Cody Teague, his friend and mentor from Vietnam, out of a prison for stealing an armored car, of which Highway is certain he is innocent. Now, both of them are fugitives, and a number of parties, including Jed are after them as they search for the evidence to prove Cody's innocence. We get our guest stars, Chad Everett, and Joseph Bottoms, who plays the Cody Teague.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recognize those guys too well, but what I gleaned from this is I liked how they pitted Jed versus
Yeah.
Highway in the air, but ultimately, you see Jed dodging and throwing the chopper off as the co-pilot or his partner, the rogue guy, was trying to shoot down Highway.
Yeah.
And of course, he's being obnoxious. Oops, I'm sorry, mate. That kind of thing. Oh, I slipped again. This kind of thing, um, that was kind of cool. And I liked how it was kind of like a scene from Knight Rider where he gets into a jail to basically get busted out, to try to get to the root cause of everything. So
Yeah.
it was pretty cool.
They circle back to this episode too later in the series.
Yes.
It might have been the very last episode if my memory serves me correctly. So. Basically with this this character, this mentor of Highway. So it was interesting in that fact, and you know, everybody's got seemingly a mentor, you know, where they start out or who they learn from, that kind of a thing. So that was kind of, I guess, stereotypical in these television series, to, you know, have an episode and they go back and figure out how they started somewhat. But that's what I took out too, what you were talking about with how the highwaymen essentially report to, you know, this agency or whatever, and they their mission can, be pitted against each other, and they're not
Right.
always working together. Where, essentially they weren't going to have a showdown or anything, even though Jeddo at a couple points tells them, yeah, I think they wanted them to come in or turn themselves in or something. But and you could tell he was just like you said, being a little clumsy and letting them get away until they could prove their innocence, that kind of thing. But it was, yeah, I mean, it was a little bit more telling into the series, and it was fun having them pitted against each other in just episode number 3.
Right. That brings us on to number 4, The Haunted Highway. When an American Indian is accused of murder, Highway and Jeddo investigate and stumble onto a long forgotten gold mine and an ancient curse of fire and ice, which will kill anybody who tries to mine there. This episode was originally scheduled for March 25th of 1988, but was postponed and eventually aired after all the other episodes, although it is oftentimes referred to as Frightmare. I don't know why they changed it, but we have our guest star, which I recognized right away, which was Marla Heasley from the A-Team. Kind of cool to see her there. Then we had Paul Coslow, Roger Gibson, Michael Horse, Dale Birdie, Gary Grubbs, and a few others there. But this one was, I think every episode has that reach back where they go into another culture and try to help that culture. And I guess I like seeing it. I like that they're not out to save only a select few people.
Right.
But that gold mine, that intrigue where these people are mining after it, and they basically seem to be, lack of a better term, they keep getting the curse trying to mine for it. And here, I think they eventually do find it. I think that's what happens. That the Native Americans do eventually get to that hidden treasure. What did you take from it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know. I sometimes get stuck on the stereotypes and how that they work in some of these Native American things into series, and it seemed like there was a pool of actors, Native American actors, that appeared in every single television show when they needed one. So you kind of recognize the faces in this. But I pulled out Tanya there from the A-Team, recognized her, but it's again, this one probably wasn't one of my more favorite ones of the series. And I didn't really jot too many notes down or anything for this one. What about you?
No, I'm the same. It wasn't a highlight by any means, but it was just me. I admire that they reach out and do the Native Americans. Yes, it seems like there's only a few Native Americans that became actors.
Yeah,
it's just like Amish. I'd seen the same Amish guy that appeared in MacGyver and something else within the same time frame, and I'm like, well, I guess if you're only got a few to pick from, you got to go with what you got.
right.
Sadly. And what's funny is some of these actors I've seen were on MacGyver, and later on, the Native Americans rather were on MacGyver, and then were later on in the season 4 of Airwolf. So, like I said, you only got a select few, and some of them have to travel wherever the money is, wherever the show is.
Right.
This on episode 5, which is Summer of 45, aka 45, where we see Highway and Jeddo actually do a little bit of Back to the Future, well, going back in time to 1945 to rescue Miss Winthrop, who has not returned after pursuing a twisted genius who has intent on ending the atomic age before it ever even began. Um, this episode also does not show DC Montana, who is Tim Russ. This is the only episode not to feature Highway's truck. I guess it must have had a fender bender before. Uh, or or my take on this episode for this particular point is that I think they were trying to show off the other truck. That's just my take. I think they
Yeah,
were trying to, we always see Highway's truck. It's always the star, but we don't see much of Jed OHS Truck and what it does. So maybe
yeah,
that was my take. They just made this one the star for the episode.
right. Yeah, I this was one of the better episodes too. One
Agreed.
of my favorites of the series, and just the plot of it, where somebody finds this portal essentially to the past and is using it uh, pretty much for good in trying to stop the atomic bomb from being invented, created, put into use. And there's this whole other little side plot too with Highway and this girl from the diner, which was a fun, uh, basically a fun romantic uh, story, side story, and how he meets her in the past and gets back to the future, and and then there's that little meet up there at the end of the episode too. Kind of reminded me a little bit of like Quantum Leap, and I don't know if they were. I don't know when Quantum Leap began. I think that was probably after this show was, but it kind of had a little bit of that feel to it. But I don't know. I like time travel and how it was used, particularly in this episode, and I enjoyed this one. I thought it was one of the better ones of the 9.
Quantum Leap started in 1989.
Okay, so that was after it.
But like
Um,
you, I like that they did this little sci-fi take portal thing. Uh, I like the fascination. I was trying to think. I thought he would try to keep it all separate, like he wouldn't get anybody's business. But when he got to liking this girl, and then like you said at the end of the episode, he kind of revisited her. There's actually
mhm,
that cool connection, that one mystery of what happened for her, basically 40 years ago or so.
yeah.
I think it was this episode, me and the little things in the episodes, right? I think this episode is where you see them getting in the truck or out of, and he's flipping just a bunch of switches, toggle switches in the truck.
Mhm.
And a follow up scene with the truck, they're indoors or inside the car, and it's the same dash as Highways, all digital. So I'm sitting there going, oh, okay. So they didn't do this one too well because you got tons and tons of flip switches all over, all mechanical manual switches. But then you got over here in the we'll call the CG world. It's really not. It's supposed to be all this nice digital stuff, but I'm sure I'm sure just to get the truck running, they needed to do something to make it functional.
Right, right. Uh, yeah. So again, this was probably one of the ones I would recommend you go back and take a look at if you are going to review the series. The next episode was probably my favorite of the series, called "Send in the Clones." This one's had Highway befriending a strange but friendly man named Mac, who is promptly snatched away by the army. Highway then is investigated what is going on, and him and Jetto discover that Mac is actually a clone programmed with a deadly assignment. This episode actually doubled as a pilot for a proposed spin-off series called McClone, which was never produced. The and Mac is played by NFL Hall of Famer, I think, Howie Long. and just going back and trying to find his first start in acting. This was essentially it. He was in I think a couple of smaller roles before that while he was still playing, and I think this was still during his playing days as well. But it was fun to see him. There's a couple of movies in the '90s that I liked him in. One called Broken Arrow with John Travolta, where he played basically his Travolta's second-hand man, or first-hand man, I guess you would say,
Right.
one of the bad guys. And then he had his own movie in 1998 called Firestorm, which was pretty cool. It was he was like a fireman, one of those that fights wildfires, and there was a plot going on with murder, and I believe it was some kind of bank robbery, and he found himself kind of in the middle of that as these wildfires are going on. I've always enjoyed. Was one of my favorite players growing up. So seeing him in this episode was fun, and then this was another pretty cool plot for an episode for being mid '80s and talking about cloned people, and that they had that scene in the diner where he's ordering stuff and he puts ketchup like on top of his burger, and they're trying to teach him basic stuff, and he's just seems a little off, obviously. Right. And then I don't know, it was kind of all ado about nothing, at the end of the episode when he wants to, what was it, the mayor of New York he was going after, and
yes, yeah.
Turns out he was not essentially trying to kill him, but anyway, I thought it was a fun episode. What did you think?
It was pretty cool, but it's weird. I thought it was more far-fetched than the UFO, I guess. But it was still interesting that it became, because he was a clone, he really wasn't that robotic cyborg, whatever.
Yeah.
So he really wasn't a true programmed, artificial intelligence.
Right.
It was just straight out, they cloned a body or cloned organisms and tried to throw junk in his head and hope that the guy would execute the mission.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was pretty cool in a lot of scenes where like more comical, not really cool, but comical, like you said, like where he's at the diner and he doesn't know how to do stuff. And then when they figure it out that he's operating as a 10-year-old, in a 30-year-old's body, so he doesn't know when he walks up to that prostitute, and, keeps, "Hey, I like you, blah, 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 blah. Do you have any money?" "No." "Oh, I knew it too good to be true." I mean, that kind of comedy was there.
Yeah.
It was I don't know that I would call it my favorite, but it was still a good episode.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's keep moving on. We got 3 left. Episode 7 was the Billionaire Body Club, and this one had a highway discovering a dead body drained of blood and missing organs, and then him and Jed are sent in to investigate, and they're soon on a trail of a bloodthirsty doctor trading in spare body parts for the rich and the powerful. And of course, they recognized right away the doctor is played by Christopher McDonald, aka Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore, and several other television shows and movies along the way. So it was fun to see him in this kind of sinister type role and playing the bad guy. And he's kind of good at that, but this was maybe a step above, some of the comical, movies and such he's been in. What did you think of this episode?
I think I liked it better. I think it because it sucked me in, and how they thought this one out. To me, they did, where like you said, they're harvesting organs for the rich. Basically, they're rich in how to do.
Hmm.
And I got sucked in because I'm like, man, I just want to smack this guy right now. Why are you taking so long to just not, bulldoze him or something? It really drew me in, and that's why I liked it.
Hmm.
Yes, I saw Shooter McGavin. Which is sad that he's known for that now, but I always I mean, he's usually the bad guy. I don't think I've seen him as a good guy, unless in passing, but I think I've always seen him as a
Right.
bad guy character. Um, and like you said, he's more sinister, not unlike Happy Gilmore, where he's more of a comic bad guy. Um, but yeah, it was just I don't know. I got sucked into this one. This was good.
Yeah.
A lot better episode. I don't, if I remember it, I don't think they did much with the truck. I mean, they just drove in and drove out. I don't think they did much.
They did have the helicopter fly over. They did like a recon on trying to find them in the warehouse there,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
and they stopped to oh, hey, we hear a helicopter, while they're trying to do their surgery. Um, but yeah, there was more just uh, recon with the helicopter when they're trying to track down these guys.
Right.
Um, but the next episode was pretty good.
The war zone,
Yeah.
which is where after an accident, Jetto's mind reverts to 5 years previously when he was double crossed by comrades in battle who turned out to be dealing in illegal drugs and weapons and tried to murder him. In a dazed and confused state, he hunts down the two men who are now in high positions as Highway and Montana try to stop him before the army takes him out, but uncovers a vein of corruption. Uh, this one, this is the episode I have,
Okay.
and I liked this one. Maybe it's because I had it, but I liked how they really worked with the character to go on this rampage, right? That they he was on these drugs or whatever he was on,
Hmm.
and he's believing that these guys were, um, like he said, "They's in my head. I don't know what. I don't know how to get rid of them, but they're in my head." That expression, um, it was actually kind of fun to watch. And then you see Highway go after him, and then basically ditch Montana out in the desert. But that's
Yeah.
where the guy that invents the truck forgets that he's carrying a Lotus back and behind him. I whatever.
And I was trying to remember too, because that was part of it. They used that in the pilot episodes, but in the pilot movie, I'm sorry, but they didn't. I don't think used it at all in the series, did
No,
they?
just that one. This second time here, no.
Yeah. So
But
I mean, it's another head scratcher as to why they didn't try to use that use that a little bit more, in conjunction with the episodes.
right. But yeah, this was I liked it. I like that realism that you got this guy that's dealt with these people, and now these high up people are able to or have hid the truth for so long, and it takes Highway to kind of shake his buddy down and break him and find out the truth and then basically save the day.
Right.
What did you take out of it?
I well, this one had some fun guest stars. Of course, Wayne Newton was in there, and then the Colonel was played by Terry Kaiser, who is Bernie in Weekend at Bernie's. So I couldn't.
That's who that's from. I could not
Yeah,
place him. I saw him somewhere.
he. I thought he did a great job in this episode because It's again, it's another one of those TV tropes where you have the person that's you know helpful in the investigation to begin with, and then you find out they're in on it, at the end of the episode. So I thought his role was pretty good in this episode. But yeah, it's hard to get Bernie out of your brain when you see him like that. But I did. I did like again with this series only being 9 episodes, you still get a lot of backstory with Highway and his mentor there, and a little bit of Jetto, and a little bit of his history here and background into how he's now a highwayman. So this was pretty good. I like this one a lot.
Yeah.
And we had one more left.
Yeah, it brings us to Frightmare. Mafia crime lord Manetti's men use a high-tech machine that can read agents' minds to try to find the one man that is set to testify against him. When their victim dies, Manetti's men capture Miss Winthrop, and Highway and Jetto are in a race against time to save her before Manetti discovers the witness's true location. Like Jason identified earlier, this episode was the last to be filmed and was originally designed to be the last broadcast episode, and in some ways bookends the series, um, making references to and via the memory machine reworking some scenes from
Mm-hmm.
previous episodes. But however, Haunted Highway had been postponed on March 25th and ended up being what was the actual final episode.
Yeah.
Um, this, I guess, this was equally probably a great episode where they get this machine to be able to read people's minds, to get
Mm-hmm.
into people, and then you see how the agency, for lack of a better term, really worked over the mind so that they could hide the truth of where all they are, all these people are, and then they get to Jetto, and
Yeah.
they're finally able to get something, and it ends up being that the whole episode was a farce anyway to capture these guys in the end. And I thought there was they did that cleverly
Yeah.
because I even got kind of roped in on this, thinking, wow, they did this pretty well, like, oh, they got him, and here it was actually that ploy to actually go after the bad guy. I really liked
Yeah.
this episode.
Yeah. And then they put the boss there, the boss lady. They capture her and Jetto, so they both get shoved into this machine, and you just saw the machine fry a couple people's brains.
Right.
So you get that suspense added in as well. And there's at least one person this episode I recognized, Jack Ging, who played General Fulbright in
Yes.
the what was it, the last season of the A Team.
Yeah, season 5, right?
Um, he stuck out in this episode as somebody I recognize. But again, this is this whole series had that sci-fi edge to it, and bringing in this machine that could read minds, and you have this little closed circuit TV above them with this thing wrapped around their skull, and being able to go back to previous episodes and piece some other information together. I thought that was pretty good, and how that could have bookended the first season,
Right.
just the way the story went, and how to do that. I thought that was really good. So yeah, this is definitely one of the better episodes of the 9, uh, in my opinion. But well, here we are. We've kind of gone through all the episodes, the movie pilot, and we have rewatched all of the Highwayman. And I guess what do you think now, moving forward? Revisiting this show, is it something you would personally, if it ever came to DVD, would you add to your collection, or is it just one of those that I remember as a kid and I'll just let it be a memory?
No, you know me, I lent on, so if it came out the DVD, I'd grab it probably in a heartbeat. I just recently learned that Viper is out on DVD. It
uh,
comes with a price tag though, so I'm holding off till a little bit, but nonetheless, I would grab it. But
mm-hmm.
it's hard for me. I'm sorry, but it's hard for me, especially right after seeing Airwolf. Like I said before, it's hard for me that they didn't do something with those helicopters. To me, they're just conventional helicopters, just to basically get themselves out of a bind or to do aerial reconnaissance. It's not they could have done far more with that helicopter. Maybe they didn't
Mhm.
want to step on copyright laws with Airwolf, and I get it, but they could have done something. But
True.
otherwise, I mean, overall, it was a great show. I'm still sucked in. I still like the quick draw Western style look from Highway. Um, it was just a fun series. What how did you think about it?
Yeah, again, I was glad I went back and rewatched it. Glad we found it, and uh, other than the what you would call the stereotypical tropes that end up in these shows, it was fun. It was fun to watch. Uh, Glad I did, and would recommend somebody going through this if they remember it enough to know, a little bit about the show, or even if you don't remember it at all. I would recommend at least checking out a couple episodes, if not the pilot movie, just for the little sightings of those guest people we know. And uh, I don't know. I was just thinking as you were talking again about the vehicles, of if they had done a little bit more to make those vehicles, the Star kept the stealth mode, beefed up the helicopters, used that Lotus in the back of Highway's truck a little more, you think it might have gotten another season?
Oh, definitely. I don't know why it was canon in the first place. I really don't. I'm sure there's research out there that says it, but I'm disappointed that it never lasted. The only thing I can think of is I didn't even really know it existed until my dad was telling me about it, and it was already into episode 6 or 7 that it existed. So, of course, I was also a kid too. I was probably, I don't know, 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about 10, 11 years old when this came out. So, of course, I may not have watched enough NBC to get the spots, but I don't think it to me, my judgmental opinion, I guess, there wasn't enough advertising to clinch you to want to watch it. Now, I could be completely wrong, but maybe that's where they failed in keeping it going was lack of advertising.
Yeah, could have been. Uh, I was just reading a little bit here as far as, uh, though it was a short run series, it was still broadcast in several countries: Germany, France, Italy, Mexico, several others, United Kingdom. So it got out there enough that it transcended just the United States. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, those Glenn Larson shows that most of are most well known for, either the sci-fi angle or that vehicle angle, and they pretty much covered both in this show. And like you said, I don't know, it could have been, it was just up against some tough uh, competition of the time, and didn't pull in the ratings to extend the series. I was trying to find out here when it actually aired and what it was up against, um, just to see if that was actually the case. But you know, back then too, it seemed like a lot of these shows would pop up mid-season. Running March to May is kind of towards the end of that season. They're not getting a full, fall and spring uh, series of episodes, to keep the series moving along. It was probably replace something along the way. Well, let's throw. We'll give you the green light, and we'll throw you on in the spring when one of our other shows gets canceled.
Right.
Something like that. Doesn't seem like they really, had this pumped for prime time, even though the movie, aired in that fall season of '87. But yeah, like I said, I would recommend it, and it's one of those things, just part of 80s culture that we always kind of look back on, where the cars, the vehicles are the stars of the show. That just, something like that really hasn't happened in a couple decades, save for, like the Knight Rider reboot that they did in what I think that was 2008, which is 10 years ago now. But still, that was a reboot, so it wasn't anything original. But back in the 80s, all these shows hooked us kids more or less, more than adults sometimes, just for the vehicles and how we wanted to have them in our collection of toys, and imagine ourselves and pretended out in the driveway that we were driving Kid, or Airwolf, or even the A-Team van. That wasn't really a supercar, but it had that niche to where I thought it if it was given another season, it might have done a little bit better and been able to last a little bit longer. But anyway, we are going to turn off the power button here on the TV for Highwayman, and tell you to go out to YouTube and search for the channel TVs _ Sledgehammer, and go check it out. And you can get back to us. You can either leave a comment on our YouTube recording video. You can go over to rediscoverthe80s.com and leave a comment there on the notes in the announcement that we'll be posting there. And we're on pretty much all the social media as well, Twitter and Facebook. So leave us a comment. Let us know what your memories of Highwayman, and if you go back and watch a couple episodes, tell us what you think over there, and we will keep trucking along. Maybe we can just for a quick minute here dive into some of the shows that we've got in the queue, I guess we'll say. Because there's several TV series that I'd like to go back and talk about, and on this theme of vehicles. They did a Blue Thunder TV series that lasted just 13 episodes, and that starred, I believe it was what's his name, Hightower. He was in that from the Police Academy movies.
Oh, yeah.
Bubba Smith. He was in that. I believe you had Dick Butkus, and you had Dana Carvey, aka Garth from Wayne's World, and several other things. That was a short run series. I think that one only lasted 13 episodes. I also put in here some of the other Glenn Larson series, Manimal, Automan. I've never watched any of those. I did put Street Hawk in here. I own the DVD set of that. So I've watched those 13 episodes a couple of times, and we can revisit that if you want to do something like that. But just several other ones. The Misfits of Science. I've heard that one thrown at me several times. I don't ever remember watching an episode of that. That one was kind of I guess you can call it teen drama.
Yeah.
One of the first times that Courtney Cox appeared on television, I do believe. So that was just a few, some other fun ones. Maybe if we could find, there was a Max Headroom TV series. Hey Vern, It's Ernest. That's the Saturday morning TV series. I think that lasted only 8 or 9 episodes. I remember watching that as a kid. So we can do some fun ones too. It doesn't all have to be, dramas or anything like that. And then kind of getting into, there's a ton of cartoon series out there that were just like 13 episodes. Turbo Teen, Pole Position, Legend of Zelda, The Karate Kid. Those are a few. There's RoboCop, Camp Candy. That was one that I remember watching. I actually have a few of the comic books with John Candy I was always a big fan of his. I remember that show. There's some other ones too. We were talking a little bit about this off the air, Wyatt, where take for instance like Scooby Doo, which
Yeah.
obviously is a show we all know and love and have watched throughout the years. Well, they did a couple series with Scooby Doo in the 80s. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby Doo and Scooby Doo's Mystery Funhouse, which lasted, I think, just a handful of episodes, or in the 13 Ghosts case, there was 13 episodes for that. So we could go back and find maybe some series we know, or have watched throughout the years and have done something like this where they've taken a section and relaunched the show for essentially one season and watch something like that. There also the new Scooby-Doo Mysteries. That was another one in 1984. Like you said, the Dukes of Hazzard series, Rubik's The Amazing Cube, Incredible Hulk, and obviously this is Rediscover the 80s, so we want to try to keep it around the 80s. I wrote one down here from 1991 that I remember watching, Where's Waldo, which actually I believe the books actually started in the 80s, and they had that cartoon series in 1991. But anyway, I just kind of put a bunch together. I haven't really dug into the movies yet. I know there's several that just passed me that I would like to go watch. One that just kind of stuck out of my brain recently, since we're tied to our mask website, Agents of Mask. There was this movie called Megaforce in 1982 that is similar in nature to the animated series that we love, and I've seen a couple of our friends talk about that on social media. If we could find that movie, I've actually found it in Spanish. So
hard time for me.
I took 2 years of Spanish, but I'm lucky to let's find a bathroom if I was ever trapped in Mexico or something. But anyway, I haven't really dug into those, but I know there's several movies I want to rewatch too. But I guess we'll kind of go through the list, and if you see some that stick out, I know there's some you want to add as well that we'll hit during this podcast series. But this was fun, man. I'm looking forward to going back and reliving some of these shows and actually watching some that we have never watched the whole way through.
Right. I'm always excited what we talk about, especially when it comes to our blast from the past. It seems.
Yeah.
I'd like to see us do some of these things. It's hard to pick one because we don't know if it's readily available.
Well, and that's again, that's going to be part of how some of these are put up to the top of the list. Is
right.
We can find them on YouTube or on a streaming service somewhere that we both have, and or go find a cheap DVD set somewhere and just go ahead and watch it that way. But let me go ahead and throw out there too, if you are listening or watching and you've got one that you maybe recently rediscovered yourself, or have a suggestion for us to put on the list, please let us know. Because I like to think I know a lot about the 80s, but there's also several things that just totally skip me, and some I'm embarrassed about. But we'll definitely take any and all suggestions on the show moving forward. But let's go ahead and wrap it, and we'll catch you on the next Rediscovered podcast right here on the Rediscover the 80s podcast feed. And on behalf of my buddy Wyatt there, we bid you farewell until the next episode.
Thanks for watching and listening.